everyone. Welcome to this new series on Manage Your Career, taking charge your career. Today with Susanne from Point to Rise, we are going to talk about how to deal how to deal with self-validation. Hello, lovely. How are
Hi,
you doing?
sweetheart. I'm so good. I am hot and sweaty in
Me
Charleston, South
too.
Carolina. Oh my God.
I was like, oh my God,
Somebody.
I look different today. And also, I'm in a different apartment, so I'm handling new lightings and everything. It's so different.
You're good, my darling. Okay,
Of
let's talk
course.
about
And I mean,
validation.
it doesn't matter. That's not what's important. What's important is the content of our talk, not how we look.
Not the lighting, as you
Yeah.
can tell. Yeah.
The sound
Oh,
could be important because we can hear what we say, but not
yes.
really. Yeah.
I do like that your lipstick matches your shirt. I love that. It's pretty amazing.
I do like
Okay.
purple. But let's go back
Yeah.
to the topic. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining.
Hi, guys.
So the
Yeah.
topic we wanted to discuss today was how to deal with. I was actually struggling to how to phrase the topic of today. I think it's how to deal with self-validation. When we discussed the topic of today, you and I, Susanne, I was saying that I see a lot of my students are still waiting for someone else, usually a teacher, to tell them what they're good at. And
Hmm.
I don't think it's restricted to the ballet world, to be really honest. I think that's just very normal when we're young. We wait for other people to tell us we're good for this and we're good at that. The thing is to transition into being more autonomous. And for me, this is what being an adult means, is being more
Hmm.
autonomous and not always waiting for other people to tell you, do this, do that. That's called being a teenager.
Okay. So funny enough, after we decided to talk about this topic, everything around that was coming up was around validation, and I found myself struggling in finding self-validation from outside sources, and really went down the rabbit holes. Like, oh, really? That was my entire life. I looked for validation
Mm-hmm.
only from the outside world, because that was what I was brought up with. This is what I
Mm-hmm.
learned in school. That was the job, quite honestly, and it had perpetuated itself all the way into my corporate career.
Mm-hmm.
And only when I became an entrepreneur did I realize that, why am I sitting here and waiting for somebody to tell me that I'm doing a good job? It's not going to happen. You have to,
No.
nope.
You noticed?
Yeah, I noticed, but I
Yeah.
noticed
And the
while I was
paycheck
sitting
doesn't come from
around.
someone else.
No, and I was sitting around. I was like, okay, so who's going to tell me what to do? Who's going to tell me that I'm doing a great job? Yeah, you.
Yourself.
But
No, I mean like myself.
yeah,
I'm
you have to do that to yourself. And after I realized that, it just all broke open, and that I had spent so much time in this belief that validation is supposed to come from somewhere else, and that is not the truth. I don't know where we pick it up, and how we learn it, or who is teaching us that that's the right way. I think it's almost a default
I think
way
it's
of
just a
ours.
default, and then I don't think anyone teaches it consciously. It's just a default. I mean, when you're a kid, people tell you do this, don't do that. And then when you're learning to be a dancer, when you're studying, of course you need an external eye to tell you what's right and what's wrong, what looks good, what doesn't look good. The thing is that there needs to be a transition at some point into being autonomous, and this is not being done consciously. So some people pick it up and they become autonomous. They default less and less onto outside validation. But then I guess the point of the topic we're having, you and I, is for the others, those who don't pick it up. And there's nothing wrong with them. I'm not saying you're worse than. It's just you need help to understand what are those strategies that others may have found on their own. Lucky. Lucky them.
Lucky you.
Lucky
Oh,
them. Or
but
sometimes you find it, but it takes you 5 years, and if someone can explain that to you and it takes you less time, good. For me, this is the purpose of this conversation: is let's help each other out. Let's learn from each other's experience to make life easier for everyone.
And I was just on another live while I was waiting for you. And it was in those moments where we share our story and where we share our experience is when we
Mm-hmm.
build relationship and learn from each other how we can really rise each other up to like the next level. And I was like, oh, isn't that fitting? It's just the universe is just beautiful.
It
But
is. It is.
let's go
And
back
that's
to
how I love when we're
validation.
sharing our experience,
Yeah.
because definitely for me, that self-validation has never really been a problem. I'm more of a rebel type of personality, and I'm more like, I don't care what you think. I'm not saying I'm not bothered when people think something, really. Like, don't think that people are not really looking for self-validation. I'm not bothered. It does bothers me sometimes, but it doesn't define me.
That's the difference, right?
And I guess that's where I want people to be. I want them to think, okay, I'm listening, I'm hearing you. I may disagree with you, but what you think of me doesn't define me. It's just your opinion. And in some
Mm-hmm.
cases, you want to hear it, you want to make a change. And in some cases, you want to just embrace what you decided that your life will be. And the thing for me is, if you don't get there, then you can never have that freedom of defining what your life is going to be. You're always letting someone else decide for you everything. They decide for you what line are better for you. You let them define what kind of technique is better for you. You let them define what role you want to aspire to. And
And can I add
of
something? Like
course,
when we are perpetuating this kind of behavior in the studio, we're also taking it into the other studios that we're in, like in
yes.
our relationships, in our own personal life, what we're doing after our career. It is just so ingrained in us that we're depending because we haven't found our self-worth yet, right? And that's where I feel the conversations need to happen, particularly between students and teachers,
Mm-hmm.
to build that awareness. Even though I'm here telling you what to do, how can I still foster everybody's individuality and understanding that your validation, your own worth comes from your inside,
Yeah.
not from what everybody else thinks.
And I think there's like a room for improvement in helping the teacher get there. Because to be the
Mhm.
devil's advocate, I hear a lot of them who want this, and I feel that they just don't know how to make it happen, because they
Mhm.
complain about the fact that there's not enough dancers who are autonomous. There are not enough dancers who are finding on their own before them. Like, I had a conversation last week with one friend of mine who's a teacher, and he was saying, it is so draining, I have to do everything. And
Hmm.
so I kind of laughed and I said, maybe you can make changes in your class so that it happens. It won't happen overnight. It's like everything. It's
Yeah.
like everything you're teaching. And what you are doing is the same. It's not going to happen overnight, but you can influence the way they behave in the class by changing the way you behave in the class.
Mhm.
And so let's see what happens from there. But I just wanted to be a little bit the devil's advocate, because sometimes we feel like the teacher are creating, some teachers, let's say, are creating this environment because they like it. But very honestly, this is not what I hear. They don't like it. They really want the dancers to be more autonomous. A lot of them are saying they want them to find their own solutions first. And I guess it's not easy. When you're a teacher, how do you get that? Especially if you have a big class, how do you get that?
I'm just shooting from the hip here, but you be really upfront and honest about it.
Hmm?
Like, this is what I want to establish. This is what I would like to
Yeah.
see in you, because then that will make it easier for you when you're standing on stage. Um,
And
and
I love what you're saying,
let's
because we
work
don't see
together.
much of that. I think this is the
No.
first step. I've heard only one, and of course, one of what I've seen, and it doesn't mean it's 1% or whatever. But I've seen only one teacher start their class saying what I call rules of engagement. Here's how I'm gonna teach. Here's what I expect from you. Here's what you can
Mm.
expect from me. And here's what I want you to get out of the class. So if you don't get it, you can you can decide that I have failed.
Right.
And I was very impressed because this is business management 101. And I was very pleased to see this kind of skills that we know are working, that we know are creating some kind of a success, being used. I'm like, yes, we're getting there.
And that's exactly what we've been talking about for the past 3 months now, is how can we combine those skills together? You know, I remember our teachers just came into the studio and expected, and there was no intention set. There was no, okay, here's where we want to go today. Here's what I want from you. This is what you can expect from me. We're going to go all the way till here. If we don't get there, then we'll do that tomorrow. There was no setting up the class. It was just, oh, what's going to happen today? Is she in a good mood or is she in a bad mood?
Yes.
You know, and that's not how you build people. This is not how you give or help others to become their very best. It is just an egotistical, pardon the word, journey that we're playing out, and not to their fault, because maybe they don't know better. But I think
most of them, they just don't know better, because everything you're talking about, it's old management style. That's how it was. The only reason it changed, and not everywhere, because I still had managers who were like this. They thought they thought you were in their head and you knew their expectations. And every time you're like, well, you didn't tell me you wanted this. Well, you should know. Okay.
So it's about setting expectations, setting intentions,
I have personally learned this in management training class and leadership classes, because leadership is not the same as management. It's very uncomfortable at first, because this is not something we're used to, because even at school, teachers at, like, you know, non-dance class school. I almost said normal school, but they don't do that either. They don't come with a class like rules of the class. This is what you can expect from me. This is what I want to expect from you. So I would expect that from you. And if you don't do that, you are not participating to this class. And this is what you can expect at the end of this program. It's very, like, I remember the first time I had to do that, I felt that it was so weird. And then, like everything, you get used to doing it. The more you do it, the more you feel comfortable. And the best is actually when you start to get the results that you were expecting, because it validates that, okay, this works. It's less stressful. Everybody's happier. And you get the level of results that you were expecting. And when you don't, nobody is surprised. They knew that, you know, this was expected from them. They delivered this. There is a gap. There's no discussion about that. So everybody can focus on, okay, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? Instead of being like, oh yeah, but you didn't explain it very well. I didn't know. And, you know, wasting all your energy on blaming someone else.
Right. Radical candor, right? So yet again, we're talking about really fundamental leadership skills that
leadership skills.
Yeah.
Because
so
everybody's a leader.
Here's my, well, okay, we'll talk about that next time. Here's my thought around when we say, you know, they don't know better, and we can't blame them. Like, I'm not about putting blame on anybody. What I'm saying is that shouldn't it be in everybody's best interest to find the very best way and keeping an open mind and a learner's mentality when becoming a teacher? Because when we go to a teacher, we want to, you know, get the very best, because we are also exchanging energy for that in terms of money. So I think the excuse that we've done it this way for so long and it worked is not an excuse that I will, well, really celebrate anymore. Like, Google is a very beautiful platform. If you don't want to spend any money on your development, go on YouTube, learn about leadership.
But this argument is flawed anyway, because you're saying the excuse is we've done that for many years and it worked. It doesn't work.
Well, not for them though, right? So but we're talking about validation.
Producing a result is not the same as being efficient
And producing the best results
or
either.
producing the best result. And what we're talking about, you and I here, is looking for solutions, for strategies, for tools, for techniques that gets better result, more result, not a result. I think what we're all saying is, yes, of course, a couple of good dancers came out of those training, but what if we could have more good dancers? What if we could have better dancers? What if they were happier? I'm not saying they're not happy. I'm just saying happier. Like, what if everything was a level higher? I don't think anyone would say no, of course. So this is all what we're talking about, is how do we improve the things from where we're at that was working at some point, because that's what we knew, but now we know better. Let's get there. And you know what? I am pretty sure in 5 years from now, we'll have another conversation and be like, you know what we were talking about 5 years ago? There's better than that. This is how
Well,
we grow.
yeah. And isn't that the saying, if you don't look for ways to grow, you're actually starting to die because you're standing still,
Yeah.
you're hanging on to something that once was, but no longer will, really sustain itself.
No.
So can we get back to validation? Because it is
I actually think we ended up on a different topic, which was
totally, yeah.
how as a teacher you can get autonomy out of your dancers. I am sorry, guys, we have answered this question.
Which
But we
goes
can go back to
into
self-validation.
but which goes into validating, right? Or
Yes.
having the ability, giving your students the ability to stand on their own feet and know exactly how to validate their own worth, their own being, and stand on their own 2 feet, so that they're not addicted to outside sources, which
Yes.
gives them the short-term fix, but not a long-term joyful career.
But if your environment doesn't give you this, and
Mm,
you cannot rely on your environment to
yeah.
teach you that, to feed you this is how you have to do the work yourself,
Mhm.
which actually sometimes is more rewarding, yeah. Somehow,
All the time.
sometimes we complain we had to learn it the hard way, but sometimes I have to say, learning it the hard way, if it's not too hard, gives less, like, makes the lesson even more powerful.
And it gives you a tool to share because you're learning it the very best way,
Yeah.
quite honestly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, tools to
The,
well, first of all, can we go how to know if you're looking for outside validation? And then if that's the case, how can you actually find it yourself within you? Like what are the steps? And it's just it's a lot of work, but it's good work. So
for me, the most evident sign is when your mood or your motivation changes because someone said something, more than when you realize yourself that you've done something wrong. So let's say, for example, I don't know, you're in class, and, oh, this moment where, I don't know, let's say triple turn is a challenge for you, and you nailed that triple, and it looks nice and clean. And the first thing you do is check if someone has seen it,
yeah.
rather than be happy and celebrate.
Yeah.
And then maybe look at, because you want to celebrate with the others. For me, this is a sign. If
Mm-hmm.
you look first at, have you seen it? And worse, if you're upset because nobody's seen it. So like, if nobody's seen it, it doesn't exist. This is not going in the direction of being autonomous and looking for self-validation.
So that's a great sign. I had a self-validation issue actually just yesterday in the gym. My heart monitor wasn't working properly,
Mm-hmm.
and I noticed that I get my validation whether or not I'm working hard enough on myself,
Oh.
from whether or not in what zone I am and how many calories I'm burning.
Ooh.
So I had to have a really good conversation with myself. It took me half an hour to figure out what was going on.
Yeah.
I was getting frustrated. I worked harder and harder to like a point of exhaustion. I was like, why is this not going? And I was getting down on myself. Like the self-talk that was bubbling up was
Mm-hmm.
very negative and not really helpful for me at all. Um, However, I remember that was my day-to-day life as a dancer. I would always
Mm-hmm.
talk to me like that. And it took me 30 minutes to go ask for help. And I figured out that I needed validation in the numbers, whether or not to know that I was working hard enough. Crazy. So that's another sign
I
when
don't
you are,
think it's crazy. It's
well, it's the
what's the word
journey.
I'm looking for? It is reassuring. You're looking for something reassuring, something you can rely on.
Mm, yeah,
And I
but
really insist in that, because
mm,
when we do this work, sometimes we end up beating ourselves up. And remember the
mm,
talks we had before, when you do things like this, you're protecting yourself. So don't stop thinking you're stupid, what you do is crazy. No, you're trying to protect yourself. Be kind with yourself.
yes, and thank you for saying that. I had to have a good chat with myself to give myself grace, and that um I was caught off guard that I wasn't at that the process wasn't going faster for me, you know, where I would have been in the situation where I could have said, well, I know I'm working hard enough. I know I'm doing my very best. I don't need those numbers. So that's the next
Yes.
step, you know.
Yeah.
So to wrap this up, when you find yourself looking at outside sources to know that you're working hard enough or that
Mm-hmm.
what you're doing is good enough,
It's good
that's
enough. It's worth it. Yeah.
yeah, that's when we're looking or thriving on outside validation more than actually being able to give it to ourselves.
And so the next step is to ask yourself, what would it take for me to be happy with the results?
Mm,
What does good look like to me? Without asking anyone else, for me, what does good look like?
yeah.
And how do I know?
How do I know?
How do I know it's good? And look at when you reply to the how do I know it's good, according to whom? If the answer is according to me, then you're in the right direction. When the answer starts to be according to the numbers of my watch, someone else, then try to find some time to ask yourself more questions about how does look good how does good look like to me,
Mm-hmm.
according to my standards, according to my goals, according to what I want to achieve in my life. Which doesn't mean you don't care about what other people say. What other people say are important feedback, important information to allow you to evolve, to change, to grow, learn more, discuss, have conflicting thought with yourself. But at the end of the day, it's you who decide, not them.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Now, maybe we should talk about how to get to that place next time because that is a journey. And as my example, I think, is the best example on that, we possibly will be on that journey for as long as we're living because it takes, yeah, awareness and daily work. It takes and work as in love to yourself and understanding and grace and awareness in really not making anybody's opinion um, define who you are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then let's do that. Let's go deeper into how do we get there, because it's a deep topic. So maybe we need to be a little bit more practical and give
Mm-hmm.
people a couple of practical tools that they can put in practice right away.
And maybe also there are other ways how it actually shows up in our life,
Yes.
like through drawing negative attention to all of these higher psychology. Oh my gosh, that word is not going to come out. The reverse psychology
Yes.
meanings. Yeah. So there we go. And we are going to be live tomorrow on the Point of
Yeah.
Rice account, and we are going to talk about money, I believe, right? We were talking about money.
We're talking about how to value your worth.
Yes, yes.
That was
Know your
a
worth.
follow on from today's conversation. Once you've at a better place to understand your worth and your value, what you're good at, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't need other people to tell you, well, actually, no, then you can start defining how much you're worth, what is your value, how much you can ask, what contracts can you actually request, and which ones maybe you have to do some work to get there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We shall talk about that tomorrow.
Let's talk about that. Thank you
Okay.
everyone for joining.
Thank you everyone for joining, and we will see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.
Bye.